Today, Solana's co-founder says Bitcoin has to adapt or face a user exodus. The majority of Salvadorans quit using the country's crypto wallet, and crypto and stock brokerage Robinhood plans deep job cuts. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Kate Rooney. Digital currencies are moving higher today. As of noon Eastern, Bitcoin was in the green. It crossed back above $39,000. Ethereum was worth about $2,800, and Solana was trading near $98. Okay, on to the top stories. First, Robinhood is laying off nearly a tenth of its workforce. Ahead of earnings tomorrow, CEO Vlad Tenev announcing in a blog post that the company will cut 9% of its more than 3,800 employees. Tenev says the layoffs are necessary as the era of hypergrowth Robinhood saw during the pandemic and meme stock mania comes to an end. And Tenev also says the company's 2022 goal is to focus on adding more crypto to its platform. Robinhood stock reached a new 12-month low today in reaction to that news. Next, a new study finds that the majority of Salvadorans have quit the country's crypto wallet. The U.S. National Bureau of Economic Research found that 6 in 10 redeemed the country's offer for $30 in Bitcoin, then stopped using the service. The NBER also says that most people aren't using the wallet for transactions across borders either. El Salvador did launch the crypto wallet back in September of 2021, and while the NBER says nearly 40% of users downloaded the app that month, virtually no one has downloaded the app this year. Finally, Maple Finance is expanding beyond Ethereum. The crypto lending platform added support for the Solana network and pledged $45 million to developers to spur growth. It plans to grow that number to about $300 million by the end of 2022. Maple provides uncollateralized loans to institutions. Okay, for our main story, I'm here at Crypto Bahamas. I had the chance to sit down with Solana's co-founder, Anatoly Yakovenko. Solana hosts numerous decentralized apps and NFTs. It aims to take on Ethereum directly, thanks to its ability to handle more than 60,000 transactions per second. People think Solana could be a faster, less energy-intensive rival to Bitcoin and Ethereum. Despite all that promise, though, the price of the network's SOL token has declined in recent weeks. I had the chance to ask Anatoly why he chose to start this Ethereum competitor and whether Bitcoin can keep up with some of the proof-of-stake networks. Anatoly, thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So Solana now has become a bit more of a mainstream investment, at least for our audience. Talk about building that and sort of the backstory of Solana. How'd you get here?
As the legend goes, I had 2 coffees and a beer, and I had this eureka moment that there's a way to track passage of time in a blockchain. And, you know, I spent most of my career at Qualcomm. I don't know if folks have heard of this thing called TDMA, time division multiple access. That was the foundation of 2G cellular networks. And that light bulb to me meant that like we can apply a lot of the technologies that worked for cellular now to blockchain. So that was the start of it. I had a bunch of my colleagues from Qualcomm join me, and it took us about 2.5 years to build it. And we launched literally 4 days after the huge double black swan crash, so March 16th, 2020.
Wow. Wow. So you launched that week that there was the crazy market crash? Wow. What went through your mind then?
A lot of people thought that we were crazy to do so, but you know, I kind of thought the worst time to do it is right before the crash. So if you're going to time anything, then right after seems like a good time.
Got it. Silver lining there. Really interesting. And so for somebody who's not as familiar with building on blockchains, how would you describe what it is that Solana provides for developers?
It's a cheaper, faster blockchain. If you really had to boil it down, that's all it is.
How do you measure that?
You can measure it by the number of transactions per second or per day and the cost that the users pay. Solana had a peak day with over 60 million transactions during that day from applications. And I think, you know, Ethereum and kind of all the other chains combined, they do about 1 to 2 million per day each. So it's quite an order of magnitude ahead.
And what about the mining technique here? We talk a lot about Bitcoin and the environmental impact. How is Solana different, and how are you guys creating new Solana? So,
you know, I spent most of my career making code as efficient, energy efficient on mobile as I could, and I would be ashamed if Solana wasn't as energy efficient as possible. So if you look at Solana's energy report, a single Solana transaction is about 2 Google searches worth of energy. So I think even out of proof of stake networks, it's one of the most energy efficient ones, if not the most energy efficient one.
And do you anticipate other blockchains moving in that direction? I know Ethereum has said that it's moving in that.
I think eventually most of the networks that people use will be proof of stake ones.
Got it. What about Bitcoin? Is there any possibility for that to?
This is probably the most controversial thing you'll get me to say. I bet that if eventually it doesn't switch to proof of stake, nobody is going to use it.
Really? Okay. So because of the environmental impact?
I think because it's simply more efficient to build a proof of stake system. So from an engineering perspective, it provides the exact same level of security, but it uses way less energy, so why not?
Is that why Bitcoin hasn't taken off really as a layer one platform and more of just a store of value versus people building applications on top of it?
I think the philosophy and goals of Bitcoin are all about store of value, and that requires maybe the simplest implementation that you can build. And maybe that works for now, but we'll see what happens in 10 years.
It's interesting too, in the venture capital community, some firms have just outright bought Sol instead of investing. There's obviously not a company really to invest in that case. Are you seeing more of that where they just want exposure to a platform or a certain blockchain?
I think folks want exposure to the ecosystem, and they see the number of developers building on top of it, and they see that as maybe a safer bet. But it's really hard to connect Sol to why does Ethereum or Bitcoin have any value, right? I think we're so early in the space that it's really hard to connect those.
Right.
You know, you look at something like bulletin boards in 1995. How do you predict that Facebook or Snapchat are going to exist 20 years later and it will be worth $1 trillion? I think, it would have been ridiculous to me to hear somebody say that, if I send you a photo and it disappears, that application is going to be worth $1 trillion, right?
Got it. But people are looking to get exposure through just buying the cryptocurrency itself, right?
Yeah, of course.
And what about that? I mean, you mentioned Bitcoin, Ethereum. It seems like a lot of these cryptocurrencies trade in tandem and then are also trading sort of with the NASDAQ. Do you look at all the price and what moves it versus what's happening with the underlying developer activity?
I think that's still pretty disconnected. I think the developer growth and things like that are what I'm focused on, but that's been happening regardless of where the price is, right? The price moves up and down by any amount. Like the devs are still building because they have such a long-term view. So like an outlook for a company that's building a new seed stage startup isn't looking at like market movements over the last month. They have a 2-year timeline at least.
Okay, be sure to check out that full interview and a lot more over at cnbc.com/cryptoworld. That's all for today. We'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.